The first time my ex-husband's mother called me temporary, it was in front of my daughter. She said it lightly, almost kindly, as if the word meant nothing, as if it wouldn't land the way it did, as if I wouldn't still hear it months later, replaying itself while I stood alone in my kitchen at 2:14 a.m., glue drying on my fingers, my phone buzzing with another overdue notice. Before I go any further, if you've ever been dismissed quietly, erased politely, or replaced without warning, stay with me. Like this story, comment if it sounds familiar, subscribe if you want to hear how it ends. What happened next isn't loud, but it's final. My name is Hannah Mercer. I was 31 when my life split into a before and an after. The before looked stable from the outside. Married, suburban rental in Plano, Texas, 1 child. My daughter, Lily Mercer, was 3 and already observant in a way that made adults uncomfortable. My husband, Eric Mercer, worked in logistics for a regional distributor. His parents lived 15 minutes away in a house they like to call the family hub, as if proximity gave them authority. The after started with a text message that said, "We need to talk," and ended with me standing in that same kitchen, realizing no one in that family had ever planned for me to stay. The first crack wasn't the affair. It was the assumption. Eric didn't deny it when I asked. He didn't apologize either. He sat at our small dining table, hands folded, and explained his decision like a project update. He said he was unhappy. He said I'd changed since becoming a mother. He said the woman he was seeing, Rachel Collins, understood his ambition. Rachel Collins was 26. She worked in marketing. She had no children. She laughed at his jokes. He said all of this while Lily slept down the hall. I asked him how he planned to explain it to her. He said, "She's young. She'll adapt." That word again. Adapt. Within a week, Eric moved out. Within 2, his parents stopped answering my calls. Within 3, I was invited to what they called a family discussion. It took place on a Sunday afternoon in December, 2 weeks before Christmas, in their living room with the lights already up. Red bows, stockings with names stitched in gold thread, Eric's name, his brother's, his parents', and one new stocking that read Rachel. There was no stocking for Lily. That was the moment I understood the hierarchy. His mother, Patricia Mercer, poured coffee while explaining logistics, custody schedules, holidays, financial support. She used phrases like best for everyone and moving forward. When I asked where Lily fit into this, Patricia smiled and said, "Of course she's family." But children are adaptable. Eric's father, Thomas Mercer, sat quietly, nodding along. He didn't look at me once. When I mentioned that Eric had promised to continue contributing to Lily's daycare, Patricia corrected me. "We think it's healthier if Hannah learns to stand on her own." She said my name like a lesson. Eric didn't disagree. That was the first time I realized I was no longer a person in their eyes. I was a phase that had ended. The months that followed were small and heavy. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with Lily. I worked part-time remotely, doing data entry at night while she slept. I cut corners everywhere, except her. She always had fresh fruit, clean clothes, new books from the library. I learned how quiet humiliation can be, how it doesn't shout, it just subtracts. Eric started missing pickups, then payments. When I texted him, he'd say things like, "Money's tight right now," or "We're figuring out priorities." Rachel posted photos online, holiday parties, new furniture, a trip to Vail in January. Patricia liked every photo. The breaking point came in March. Lily's preschool held a spring craft fair to raise money for new playground equipment. Parents were encouraged to contribute handmade items. Most people bought things, cupcakes, soap, simple stuff. I made something instead. I'd always been good with my hands, sewing, woodwork, painting small details. It was the one thing I did where time disappeared. I stayed up 3 nights in a row after Lily fell asleep, making wooden name signs for kids' rooms, hand-painted, soft colors, finished with beeswax. I made 6. They sold out in 20 minutes. A woman named Denise Walker asked if I took custom orders. She worked at a boutique in McKinney. She said people were always looking for meaningful gifts. I went home that night and cried in my car before going upstairs. Not because I was sad, because for the first time in months, I felt useful. I started small. An Instagram page. No face, just hands, just work. I named it Quiet Pines Studio. I didn't tell Eric. I didn't tell his family. I didn't tell anyone who had already decided I was temporary. Orders trickled in. 10, then 20, then more than I could handle alone. I tracked everything in a notebook. Costs, hours, profit margins. By June, I was making more from crafts than I ever had from my part-time job. By July, Eric noticed. He called to ask if I'd gotten a new boyfriend. I told him I'd started a business. He laughed and said, "That's cute." That laugh stayed with me longer than his absence ever did. August brought the invitation. Patricia called and said the family was hosting a Christmas fundraiser in December. A big one. Silent auction, local sponsors. It was for the Children's Hospital. She said it would be good for Lily to attend, to feel included. Then she added, "You're welcome to come." As Eric's daughter's mother. Not family, not guest. A footnote. I said yes. Not because I wanted to belong, but because I was finally ready to be seen. And because by then, Quiet Pine Studio wasn't quiet anymore. It had a waiting list, and something they didn't know they were about to underestimate. The first rule I learned after leaving Eric was this: if people don't need you, they stop seeing you. Not in a dramatic way. They don't glare or shout. They just talk around you, make plans without you, decide outcomes before you arrive. You become background noise in your own life. That's what the Mercer family did best. By September, Eric Mercer had fully rebranded himself. New haircut, new clothes, new woman. He posted photos with captions about fresh starts and growth. Rachel Collins fit neatly into the frame. She smiled easily. She leaned into him like she belonged there, and according to his parents, she did. Patricia Mercer started referring to Rachel as the one who brings stability back into Eric's life. Thomas Mercer nodded along, proud in that quiet, approving way that had always unnerved me. Their younger son, Michael Mercer, stopped replying to my messages altogether. Lily noticed before I did. One afternoon, while I was packing her lunch, she asked, "Why does Daddy's house have 2 mommies now?" I froze. I asked her who told her that. She shrugged. Grandma Patricia said Rachel helps Daddy now, like a mommy. I finished packing the lunch without saying anything. My hands were steady. My chest was not. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat on the floor of my bedroom and let myself feel it. Not rage, not grief. Replacement, that was the word. Eric hadn't just left. He'd been substituted. Efficiently. With family approval. I didn't confront him. I didn't call Patricia. I didn't send a long text explaining boundaries. I'd learned by then that explanations were wasted on people who benefited from misunderstanding you. Instead, I worked. Quiet Pine Studio grew in ways I didn't expect. Denise Walker placed a bulk order for her boutique. Another shop in Frisco followed. A woman named Carla Nguyen commissioned a set of engraved keepsake boxes for her wedding party. I raised my prices. No one complained. By October, I was bringing in just over $4,000 a month after expenses. Not enough to feel rich. Enough to breathe. Enough to say, no. That was when Eric started noticing Lily again. He asked for extra weekends. He showed up on time. He brought gifts. Expensive ones. A tablet, new clothes, toys that made noise. Patricia praised him publicly for being present. I let it happen. Not because I trusted the change, but because Lily deserved consistency, even if I didn't. One Friday evening, Eric dropped Lily off late. Rachel was in the car. She got out first, smiling like this was her driveway too. "Hannah, right?" she said brightly, extending a hand. I looked at her hand, then at Eric. "This is Rachel," he said. I thought it'd be good for everyone to meet. I didn't shake her hand. "Lily's bedtime was 40 minutes ago," I said. Rachel's smile flickered. Just slightly. Eric sighed. "You don't have to be difficult." I picked Lily up from the back seat. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "She smells like flowers." That night, I lay awake, thinking about how easily my life had been edited. Not erased. Revised. By November, the fundraiser was all Patricia talked about. She called to ask if I'd mind bringing something small for the silent auction. Nothing fancy, just a contribution. She didn't know that Quiet Pines Studio had already been invited by the hospital's development coordinator to participate officially. Denise had made the introduction after a client donated one of my pieces, and it raised triple the expected amount. I hadn't told Patricia. I said yes, of course. She reminded me of the dress code. Semi-formal, neutral colors, nothing distracting. I want it to be tasteful, she said. I agreed. 2 weeks before the event, Eric called. I heard you're making crafts now, he said. I run a business, I replied. There was a pause. Mom said, it's more like a hobby. I smiled to myself. Your mom is welcome to think that. He laughed. You always were sensitive. Sensitive, another word that followed me longer than it deserved. The night before the fundraiser, I stayed up late finishing the last piece. A large wooden wall installation, hand-carved, layered. The kind of piece people stopped walking for. It was the most expensive thing I'd ever made. I packed it carefully and labeled it with my studio name. Not my personal one. Quiet Pines Studio. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from nerves. From clarity. Because somewhere between glue drying and Lily breathing softly down the hall, I realized something important. The Mercers weren't my obstacle. They were my audience. And they were about to watch a version of me they'd never bothered to imagine. The morning of the fundraiser, Patricia texted me. Don't forget to arrive early. Volunteers enter through the side. I read the message twice. Then I put my phone down, dressed Lily in the red dress she loved, and loaded the car. I didn't go to the side entrance. I went to the front. And as I walked in, carrying the piece that would change everything, I saw Patricia Mercer's smile freeze mid-sentence. Because for the first time since Eric left, she didn't control the room. And she knew it. The ballroom smelled like polished wood and winter florals. Everything about it was intentional. The lighting, the music, the way people moved slowly, as if money had taught them to take their time. I noticed the Mercer name everywhere. On the banners, on the programs, on the welcome screen looping photos of past fundraisers. Patricia Mercer loved legacy, loved the appearance of generosity more than the practice of it. She spotted me from across the room within seconds. Her smile tightened, then rearranged itself into something social, controlled. She excused herself from the woman she was speaking to and crossed the floor with purpose. Hannah, she said, kissing the air near my cheek. You made it. I looked down at Lily, then back at her. We were invited. Patricia nodded. Of course. I just thought you'd use the volunteer entrance. I'm donating, I said. This seemed appropriate. Her eyes dropped to the crate I was carrying. Oh, she said lightly. What did you bring? An installation, I replied. It's catalogued under Quiet Pines Studio. The name meant nothing to her. Yet, but it would. She recovered quickly. Well, I'm sure it's charming. She leaned down to Lily. You look lovely, sweetheart. Where's Daddy? Lily shrugged. He's late. Patricia straightened and glanced toward the entrance, already scanning for Eric. Then she smiled again, this time at a man approaching us. Hannah, this is Jonathan Reese, she said. He's one of our major donors. Jonathan Reese extended his hand. Pleasure. I shook it. Likewise. He looked at the crate. You're contributing? Yes, I said. Wonderful, he replied. I'm always interested in supporting local makers. Patricia laughed softly. She's very creative. Creative, like it was a personality quirk. Jonathan nodded politely, then turned to Patricia. I actually wanted to ask you about the large wooden piece listed in the catalog. Quiet Pines Studio. It's already generating interest. Patricia blinked. Oh? Yes, he continued. The craftsmanship is exceptional. Do you know the artist? I answered before she could. That would be me. The pause that followed was almost imperceptible. Almost. Patricia's lips parted slightly, then closed. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. How impressive, she said. I didn't realize. Jonathan looked between us. It's the centerpiece of the auction. That was the first shift. The room didn't change. The music didn't stop. But something subtle tilted. Conversations nearby slowed. A few people glanced over, curious. Patricia excused herself quickly. I need to check on the committee. She didn't look at me again as she walked away. I felt Lily squeeze my hand. Mommy, she whispered. Are we in trouble? I knelt down to her level. No, We're exactly where we're supposed to be. Eric arrived 20 minutes later. He came in laughing, coat still on. Rachel Collins at his side, in a dark green dress that looked expensive. They scanned the room like it belonged to them. Then Eric saw me. He froze. Rachel followed his gaze, her expression shifting from curiosity to calculation. "Hannah," Eric said, approaching. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I replied. "Same as you." Rachel smiled thinly. "Patricia said you might stop by." "Stop by." Like I was delivering a package. Eric's eyes dropped to the crate. "Is that your thing?" "My work," I said. He laughed. Just once. "Mom's really letting anyone donate now, huh?" Rachel laughed with him. That was when Jonathan Reese reappeared. "Eric," he said warmly, "good to see you. I wanted to tell you, your family did a great job curating this year, especially the Quiet Pines piece." Eric looked confused. "The what?" Jonathan gestured toward the auction display area. "The large wooden installation? It's already at $15,000. Rachel's smile vanished. Eric's face flushed. "That's impressive." Jonathan nodded. "It's rare to see craftsmanship like that. Do you know the artist?" Eric hesitated. I answered. "I do." Jonathan smiled. "Excellent. We'll need to talk later." He walked away, already pulling out his phone. Eric turned to me. "Since when do you make things worth $15,000? "Since you stopped paying attention," I said. Rachel shifted beside him. "You never mentioned this." Eric didn't respond. Across the room, I saw Patricia watching us. Her posture was rigid, her hands clenched around her clutch. The auction continued. Bids climbed. People stopped me to ask questions about materials, about process, about commissions. I answered calmly, clearly. I didn't oversell. I didn't apologize. By the time the auction closed, the piece sold for $32,000, a record for the fundraiser. The applause was polite, restrained, but it followed me. Patricia took the stage for closing remarks. She thanked donors, volunteers, sponsors. She did not thank Quiet Pine Studio. She did not say my name. But when the hospital's director stepped up afterward and publicly acknowledged the contribution, there was no avoiding it. "This incredible piece," the director said, gesturing toward me, "was created by local artisan Hannah Mercer of Quiet Pine Studio." The room turned. Every head. Patricia's face went pale. Eric stared at me like I was a stranger. Rachel looked away. Afterward, Patricia cornered me near the exit. "You embarrassed us," she hissed under her breath. "I followed your instructions," I replied. "I contributed." "You blindsided me," she said. "No," I said calmly. "You underestimated me." She straightened. "Don't expect this to change anything." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "I don't," I said. "That's why it already has." That night, after Lily fell asleep, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Margaret Hale from Hale & Partners. We represent the Mercer Family Foundation. We'd like to discuss a potential collaboration." I stared at the screen. Then another message came through. From Eric. "We need to talk." I didn't reply to either, because something had shifted again. And this time, it wasn't small. It was structural. What I didn't know yet was that the fundraiser hadn't just exposed me. It had exposed them. And the Mercer family didn't forgive threats to their image. They eliminated them. The next move wouldn't be public. It would be personal. And it would come for the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. The call came the next morning, while Lily was eating cereal on the floor, her back against the couch, cartoons humming softly in the background. "Hannah Mercer?" the woman asked. "Yes, this is Angela Ruiz with Northway Property Management. I'm calling regarding your lease." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed even. "Is there a problem?" There was a pause. The kind that meant the person on the other end was choosing their words carefully. "We've received notice from the property owner. They've decided not to renew your lease when it expires next month." Next month. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. 27 days. "Is there a reason?" I asked. Another pause. "The unit is being repurposed." I knew better than to argue with scripted language. "Is that all?" "For now," she said. "You'll receive formal notice by email." The call ended. Lily looked up at me. "Who was that, Mommy?" "No one important," I said, and immediately hated the lie. That afternoon, the email arrived. Standard language, legal, polite, non-negotiable. I sat at my small kitchen table and reread it 3 times. the hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud in the silence. I hadn't missed a payment, I hadn't caused problems, I hadn't done anything wrong, which meant this wasn't about me. It was about proximity. The building was owned by a family trust. I'd seen the name once on a notice posted in the lobby, Mercer Holdings. The realization didn't hit like panic. It hit like confirmation. They weren't angry. They were efficient. I called Eric. He didn't answer. I called Patricia. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I called the leasing office back and asked for documentation, dates, ownership records, anything they were legally required to provide. By the end of the day, I had enough to confirm what I already knew. Patricia Mercer sat on the board of the trust. She hadn't confronted me after the fundraiser because she didn't need to. She just removed the ground under my feet. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to Lily breathe, thinking about boxes and deposits and school zones and the way instability sneaks in wearing polite paperwork. The next morning, I took Lily to preschool and sat in my car for 10 minutes afterward, hands on the steering wheel, not moving. I didn't cry. I planned. Quiet Pine Studio had momentum, orders booked through January, money in the account, but not enough for first, last, and deposit somewhere new without notice. And even if I found a place, the clock was loud now. Every day mattered. That afternoon, I got another call. Hannah Mercer? A man asked. Yes. This is David Klein from Hale & Partners, the name from the message. I'm calling regarding a potential opportunity, he said. We represent the Mercer Family Foundation. I smiled, without humor. I'm listening, I said. We were impressed by your work at the fundraiser, he continued. The board believes there may be room for collaboration. What kind of collaboration? I asked. A licensing agreement, he said smoothly. Your designs, produced at scale, distributed through our channels. And the terms? I asked. He hesitated, just long enough. You'd be compensated fairly, he said. Of course, there would be certain exclusivity requirements. There it was. Control. And Quiet Pine Studio, I asked, would be absorbed under the foundation's creative arm, he said. It would elevate your reach. I looked around my kitchen. The unfinished pieces, the notebook of orders, the quiet, stubborn independence that had kept me afloat. I'll need time to review, I said. Of course, he replied. But I should mention, the board is eager to move quickly. I bet they were. After we hung up, I checked my email again. Another message from Northway Property Management. A reminder of move-out procedures. No extension. No flexibility. I understood then that this wasn't about collaboration. It was leverage. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I called Denise Walker. Are you sitting down? I asked. She laughed. Should I be? I need a place to work, I said. And possibly live. Short term. She didn't hesitate. I have a guest room, and the shop has storage. How soon? I swallowed. Soon. Then come, she said. We'll figure it out. I hung up and sat very still. Gratitude and anger can coexist. I felt both. The next day, Eric finally texted. My mom says you're upset about something. Can we talk? I typed, then deleted, then typed again. No. I blocked his number. It felt less dramatic than I'd imagined. More like closing a door that had already been hanging open. By the end of the week, I had boxes stacked in the living room. Lily thought we were playing a game. Are we moving again? She asked. Yes, I said. But we're okay, she nodded, trusting me in the way children do when they don't know the full weight of the question. On Friday afternoon, a courier arrived with a thick envelope. Inside was a formal offer from Hale & Partners. Clean, generous-looking. Clauses buried in pages of legal language. I read it slowly. They wanted my work, my brand, my silence. In exchange, they'd solve my housing problem. Temporary help. That word again. I closed the folder and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop and did something I should have done months earlier. I registered Quiet Pine Studio as an LLC. I updated my business license. I booked a consultation with a small business attorney named Laura Chen, recommended by a client who didn't ask questions, just sent the contact. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I packed the last box that night while Lily slept. As I taped it shut, my phone buzzed. A message from Patricia Mercer. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the screen. Then I replied with 6 words. You started it. I'm finishing it. I turned the phone off. What I didn't know yet was that Patricia had already moved again. And her next move wouldn't involve paperwork. It would involve Lily. And once she crossed that line, there would be no negotiation left. Patricia Mercer didn't call me directly. She never did when she planned to do something cruel. She preferred intermediaries, systems, institutions that made her intentions look reasonable. The preschool called first. It was a Tuesday morning. Lily was coloring at the kitchen table, her tongue caught between her teeth the way she did when she was concentrating. "Hannah Mercer?" the director asked gently. Her name was Susan Aldridge. She'd always been polite, careful. "Yes, there's been a request for records," Susan said. "Custody related. I wanted to notify you." Eric Mercer's attorney," she said. "They're asking for attendance logs, emergency contact updates, behavioral notes." I closed my eyes. "Did they give a reason?" I asked. "Only that there may be an upcoming adjustment to parenting time," Susan replied. "I'm required to comply, but I wanted you to hear it from me." "Thank you," I said. "Please keep me informed." When I hung up, Lily looked up. "Are we late?" she asked. "No," I said. "Finish your son." She smiled and went back to coloring. I sat there, watching her small hand move across the paper, and understood something very clearly. This wasn't about winning. This was about pressure. Eric didn't have the money to fight me. Patricia did, and she had always believed children were assets to be leveraged, not people to be protected. By noon, I had an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. Subject: Notice of intent to modify custodial arrangement. I read it once. Then again. Eric Mercer, represented by James Holloway, was seeking expanded custody based on alleged instability in my housing situation and concerns about my financial unpredictability. I laughed. It was short and sharp and startled Lily so badly she dropped her crayon. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling her into my lap. "That was just surprise." The audacity would have been impressive if it weren't so calculated. They'd waited until I was packing, until my address was changing, until they could paint movement as chaos. I called Laura Chen. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "They're testing you." "I know," I replied. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. "Income, orders, contracts?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Because this isn't about custody. It's about control. And judges see that." I breathed out slowly. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You don't react emotionally," Laura said. "You respond strategically. We'll file first. We'll establish stability on paper before they can twist the narrative." I liked her immediately. That afternoon, I took Lily to Denise Walker's house. Denise met us at the door with open arms and a calm that felt like oxygen. "She can have the back room," Denise said. "There's space for her toys. And the shop's down the street if you need to work." Lily looked around. "Is this a sleepover?" "Yes," Denise said. "A long one." Lily grinned. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the guest room, I sat at Denise's kitchen counter with my laptop open and a cup of tea going cold beside me. I organized everything: invoices, deposits, client messages, delivery schedules, screenshots of sales, bank statements. Quiet Pine Studio wasn't a hobby. It was a business, and I had numbers to prove it. By Thursday, Laura had filed a preemptive response. Clean, documented, calm. Eric's claims looked thin next to my spreadsheets. Patricia's name appeared nowhere in the filings. Of course it didn't. She never put her hands on anything that might leave fingerprints. Friday brought the next escalation. A message from Eric. "Why are you doing this?" "My mom just wants what's best for Lily." I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I replied, "If your mother wanted what was best for Lily, she wouldn't be trying to take her from the only stable parent she has." He didn't respond. That evening, Patricia showed up at Denise's house, unannounced. Denise called me from the front porch, her voice low. "There's a woman here asking for you. She says she's Lily's grandmother." I stood. "I'll handle it," I said. Patricia Mercer stood perfectly straight on the porch, dressed in cream and pearls like she was attending a luncheon, not a confrontation. "Hannah," she said, "we need to talk." "This isn't your property," I replied, "and Lily's asleep." She smiled thinly. "You're making this difficult." "You already said that," I replied. She stepped closer. "You're unstable right now. Moving. No permanent residence. Courts don't like uncertainty." "I'm not discussing custody with you," I said. "You don't have to," she replied. James Holloway will. Denise appeared beside me. I think you should leave. Patricia looked at her like she was furniture. I'm Lily's grandmother, she said. I have rights. No, I said. You have opinions. Her jaw tightened. You could make this easier, she said. Sign the licensing agreement. Let the foundation absorb your little business. We'll make sure you're housed, supported. It would look much better. There it was, the trade, my independence for my child's safety. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I simply said, get off the porch. Patricia stared at me, stunned. You don't get to threaten me through my daughter, I continued. You don't get to buy compliance with fear. This isn't a threat, she said. It is, I replied. And you miscalculated. She left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Because I was done pretending this was about misunderstandings. This was a power struggle. And I had been avoiding the obvious next step because it felt too big, too aggressive. But some people don't stop when you ask. They stop when there are consequences. On Saturday morning, Laura called. They filed a motion, she said. Emergency review. Temporary custody adjustment. My chest tightened. And? I asked. And the judge scheduled a hearing, she continued. Next Friday. 7 days. The same day as the Mercer Family Foundation's annual board meeting. I smiled. Not because it was convenient. Because it was poetic. I hung up and looked at Lily, curled on the couch watching cartoons, her feet tucked under her like she was already learning how to make herself small. Not on my watch. If you're still here, if you've ever had someone use your child, your home, or your survival as leverage, pause for a second. Like this story. Subscribe if you want to see how pressure breaks when it meets preparation. And tell me in the comments if you've ever been pushed too far by people who assumed you wouldn't push back. That afternoon, I called someone I'd been avoiding. Margaret Hale. She answered on the second ring. Hannah Mercer, she said. I was wondering when you'd call. I need to review the foundation's offer, I said. And I need to understand why you really want my work. She laughed softly. Good. That means you're ready. We scheduled a meeting for Monday. What Patricia didn't know yet was that the foundation wasn't as united as she believed. And what Eric didn't understand was that custody hearings aren't decided by narratives. They're decided by evidence. I had both. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was setting the board. Margaret Hale didn't look like someone who enjoyed small talk. She arrived exactly on time Monday morning, wearing a gray blazer and carrying a slim leather folder, the kind that suggested she never brought more paper than necessary. We met at a quiet cafe near Denise Walker's shop, early enough that the place smelled like fresh bread instead of conversations. She ordered black coffee, no sugar, no milk. Hannah Mercer, she said, sitting across from me. Before we discuss anything formal, I want to be clear. I don't represent your ex-husband. I don't represent his parents. I represent the Mercer Family Foundation as an entity, and entities don't have feelings. They have risks. That's refreshing, I said. Margaret smiled once. It was brief, professional. The board is divided, she continued. Patricia Mercer has influence, but she does not have unilateral authority. The fundraiser exposed something they don't like. Me, I said. Unpredictability, Margaret corrected. You didn't fit the narrative they were prepared for. I wrapped my hands around my mug. Then why offer me a licensing agreement? Because suppressing you would be messy, she said. Absorbing you looked cleaner. And the eviction, I asked? Margaret didn't flinch. That wasn't a foundation decision. So Patricia acted alone, I said. Yes, she replied. And not everyone appreciated it. That was the first real opening. Margaret slid a document across the table. This is not the agreement you received. I scanned it. Revised terms. No exclusivity. Full ownership retained. Revenue share significantly higher. Clear exit clauses. This isn't absorption, I said. No, she agreed. It's partnership. Conditional. On what? I asked. She met my eyes. On you staying independent. I laughed quietly. You want to fund me because I'm a problem. Yes, she said simply. And because problems like you tend to surface truths before they become liabilities. I closed the folder. I have a custody hearing Friday, I said. Your client is connected to the people trying to take my daughter. Margaret nodded. I know. Then you also know why I won't sign anything this week, I added. She leaned back. I wouldn't expect you to. We sat in silence for a moment. However, she said, there is something you should know. I waited. The foundation board meeting is Friday morning, she continued, and Patricia intends to formally propose absorbing Quiet Pines Studio as damage control. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed level. Even if I decline? Especially if you decline, Margaret said. She plans to frame it as you being difficult. I nodded slowly. Of course she does. Margaret studied me. You're not panicking. No, I said. I'm counting. She smiled again. This time, it reached her eyes. That afternoon, Laura Chen called with an update. They've submitted affidavits, she said, from Eric, from his mother, claiming concern for Lily's stability. And? I asked. And they're vague, Laura replied. No evidence, just language. I have evidence, I said. I know, she replied. Bring everything. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I opened the box I'd been avoiding. Inside were notebooks, old ones, from the last year of my marriage. I hadn't kept them as records. I'd kept them to survive. Lists, notes, dates, times, missed pickups, late payments. Messages Eric sent and then deleted. Patterns. At the time, I didn't know why I wrote them down. I just knew something felt off. Now, they were documentation. I scanned everything, backed it up, sent copies to Laura. By Wednesday, Eric called from a blocked number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hannah, this has gone too far. My mom is just trying to help. You're making us look bad. There it was. Thursday morning, I met with Laura in person. She reviewed the materials carefully. Didn't rush, didn't interrupt. This is strong, she said finally. Very strong. They'll argue housing instability, I said. And you'll show proactive relocation, she replied. Support system, income, consistency. What about Patricia? I asked. Laura looked at me. Judges don't like third parties manipulating custody. I nodded. That afternoon, Denise took Lily to the park so I could focus. I sat alone in the guest room, sunlight slanting across the floor, and felt the weight of the week press down. Not fear, anticipation. Because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Patricia Mercer believed power was about leverage, about removing options until compliance looked like relief. She had never encountered someone who refused the trade. Friday morning came faster than I expected. The foundation board meeting began at 9. The custody hearing was scheduled for 1. 2 rooms, same day, different kinds of judgment. I dressed simply, neutral colors. Nothing that suggested fragility or defiance. Lily stayed with Denise. Before I left, Lily hugged me tight. Are you coming back? She asked. Yes, I said. Always. The courthouse was quiet, in the way that makes your footsteps sound louder than they should. Eric sat with his attorney, James Holloway. Patricia was there too, dressed in black, posture rigid, chin high. She didn't look at me. When the judge entered, the room stood. We sat. James Holloway spoke first. He painted a picture of concern, of transition, of a mother overwhelmed by sudden change. Laura didn't interrupt. When it was our turn, she stood calmly. She didn't argue emotion. She presented timelines, records, income, stability, consistency. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She addressed Patricia directly. Your Honor, Laura said, we'd like to clarify the role of extended family in this petition, specifically the involvement of Patricia Mercer. Patricia stiffened. James objected. The judge raised a hand. Overruled, Laura continued. Ms. Mercer holds a position of authority in a property trust that recently declined to renew my client's lease. That action coincided with this custody filing. The judge looked up. Patricia finally turned toward me. Her eyes were cold. The judge asked, Ms. Mercer, were you involved in that decision? Patricia hesitated, just long enough. That hesitation was everything. I sat perfectly still, because in that moment, the power shifted again. And this time, it wasn't subtle. The judge leaned back. I see. Court recessed briefly after that. As people stood, Eric looked at me for the first time all week. Not angry, afraid, because he understood what his mother had done, and that she had done it without his permission. The ruling wouldn't come until the end, but I already knew. This wasn't going to end in compromise. It was going to end in exposure. And Patricia Mercer was about to learn that control doesn't survive daylight. The judge's ruling didn't come that day. Instead, the court issued a temporary order maintaining the current custody arrangement and scheduled a full evidentiary hearing in 30 days. No expanded custody, no emergency changes, no leverage. That delay hit Patricia harder than a loss would have. Because delays create space, and space is where stories unravel. Outside the courtroom, Eric tried to speak to me. "Hannah," he said, lowering his voice. "This didn't have to go like this." I looked at him, not with anger, with distance. "It didn't," I said. "You chose this route." He glanced back at Patricia, who was speaking sharply into her phone. "She was just trying to help." "No," I replied. "She was trying to win." Eric opened his mouth, then closed it. Laura touched my elbow. "Let's go." By the time I got back to Denise's house, my phone had exploded. Emails, missed calls, a voicemail from Margaret Hale, marked urgent. I listened to it alone in the guest room. "Hannah," Margaret said, her voice clipped. "The board meeting did not go as Patricia planned. Call me." I waited an hour before dialing back. "What happened?" I asked. "She overreached," Margaret said. Again, I leaned against the window. "How so?" "She proposed absorbing Quiet Pine Studio without your consent," Margaret replied. "Framed it as a protective measure due to your instability." I laughed once. And 3 board members asked for documentation," she said, which she didn't have. Silence stretched between us. "One of them," Margaret continued, "asked why the foundation was pressuring a single mother during an active custody dispute." I closed my eyes. "That question landed," she added. "So what now?" I asked. "The proposal was tabled," Margaret said, "and Patricia was asked to recuse herself from any matters involving you." That was bigger than it sounded. "Patricia Mercer did not recuse herself from anything." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "There's more," Margaret added. "An internal review has been opened regarding the lease decision. The board wants distance." Distance. Patricia's favorite punishment had become hers. When I hung up, I sat on the bed and let the quiet settle. Not relief. Momentum. That evening, Eric showed up at Denise's house again. Denise called me before answering the door. "Do you want me to tell him to leave?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'll talk to him." I stepped outside. Eric stood on the porch, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, shoulders tight. "She's furious," he said without greeting. "I'm sure," I replied. "She thinks you turned everyone against her," he continued. "I didn't," I said. "She did." Eric looked tired, not angry, worn down. "She's always been like this," he said. "You know that." "Yes," I replied. "And you always let her be." He flinched. "She says you're manipulating the situation," he said. I held his gaze. "Then stop letting her speak for you." He looked away. "Rachel moved out," he said suddenly. I waited. "She said she didn't sign up for this," he added. "The fighting, the court stuff." I nodded. "Neither did Lily." He swallowed. "What do you want from me?" The question hung there, heavy. "I want you to be her father," I said, "not your mother's extension." He nodded slowly. "I can try." "Trying isn't a plan," I replied. "Showing up is." He didn't argue. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I reviewed the next steps with Laura. Discovery requests, subpoenas, financial disclosures. Patricia's involvement meant everything was now fair game. "She won't like this," Laura said. "I know," I replied. "She may escalate," Laura added. "I expect it," I said, and she did. The following week, a rumor started circulating through the parent group at Lily's preschool. Quiet at first, then louder, that I was unstable, that I was couch surfing, that my business was a front. Susan Aldridge called me into her office. "I wanted to hear it from you," she said gently, "before this gets out of hand." I told her everything, calmly, clearly, with documents. She listened, took notes, asked questions. At the end, she said, "Thank you for trusting me." The next day, a notice went out to parents reminding them that gossip regarding family matters would not be tolerated. I knew exactly where it had come from. Patricia was running out of clean moves. When people lose control, they get sloppy. The email that broke everything arrived on a Thursday afternoon. It wasn't sent to me. It was sent to the wrong person. A board member forwarded it to Margaret Hale, who forwarded it to Laura Chen, who forwarded it to me. From Patricia Mercer to James Holloway. Subject: Strategy. In it, Patricia laid out a plan, not suggestions, instructions. Pressure the housing issue. Question Hannah's income sources. Suggest mental health concerns if needed. Emphasize instability. Frame foundation support as rescue. It read like a checklist. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. Because this wasn't opinion, it was intent. Laura called immediately. This changes everything, she said. Yes, I replied. It does. This isn't just custody anymore, Laura continued. This is interference, potential coercion. I looked at Lily playing on the floor, building towers with blocks. Then we stopped treating it like a family dispute, I said. We treat it like what it is. Laura exhaled. Are you ready for what that means? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, because the truth was, I'd already crossed the line Patricia thought no one would dare approach. I had refused to be manageable, and the cost of that refusal was about to come due. The full hearing was 3 weeks away, and between now and then, everything Patricia had hidden behind politeness was going to surface. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted my daughter to grow up watching someone choose dignity over silence. And that choice was about to expose a lot more than custody. Once the email existed, it couldn't be unseen. Laura Chen called it what it was: intentional interference, coordinated pressure, abuse of influence. I called it confirmation. For weeks, Patricia Mercer had been speaking in soft tones and polite threats, pretending everything she did was concern. That email stripped the costume away. It showed strategy, direction, willingness to weaponize systems meant to protect children. And once something like that is written down, it stops being personal. It becomes evidence. Laura moved quickly. Subpoenas went out the next morning. Communications, financial records, property trust minutes, any correspondence involving James Holloway, Eric Mercer, and Patricia Mercer that touched housing, custody, or foundation resources. James Holloway tried to push back, claimed attorney-client privilege. Laura countered with the email. The judge granted limited discovery. Limited was enough. Patricia responded the only way she knew how. She denied everything. She told Eric she was being misunderstood. She told board members the email was taken out of context. She told friends I was unstable and manipulating the system. But the more she talked, the more inconsistencies surfaced. On Tuesday, Margaret Hale called. She's unraveling, Margaret said, and she's doing it publicly. I leaned against the kitchen counter at Denise's house, watching Lily draw at the table. How so? She called an emergency meeting, Margaret replied. Accused the board of betrayal. Threatened resignations. And? I asked. And they let her talk, Margaret said. Then they voted. My chest tightened. Voted on what? On suspending her from all foundation decision-making until the review is complete. I closed my eyes. That was a first. Patricia Mercer had built her identity on authority, on being untouchable. Suspension wasn't just procedural, it was symbolic. What about the lease? I asked. Under review, Margaret said. The board is concerned about optics. Optics. Another word Patricia loved. Only now, it wasn't working in her favor. That night, Eric called again. This time, I answered. She's blaming me, he said. His voice was raw, fractured. She always does, I replied. She says, if I'd controlled you better, none of this would have happened. I closed my eyes. Did you hear yourself just now? He went quiet. I didn't know she sent that email, he said. I swear. I believe you, I replied. But belief doesn't undo impact. What do I do? He asked. I thought about it. You tell the truth, I said. For once. There was a long pause. I don't know how, he admitted. That's not my problem anymore, I said gently. It's Lily's. He exhaled shakily. I don't want to lose her. Then stop letting your mother use her as a bargaining chip, I said. He didn't respond. 2 days later, Laura forwarded me a document marked confidential. Property trust minutes, 6 months back. There it was. A discussion item labeled Tenant Risk Management. My unit number was listed. Patricia's name appeared next to a note. Proceed quietly. No mention of me. No reason given. Just action. Laura called immediately. This ties the housing decision directly to her influence. So it wasn't coincidental, I said. No, Laura replied. It was punitive. That word landed differently than I expected. Punitive meant deliberate. Punitive meant motive. Punitive meant consequences. The court date loomed closer, and with every document, Eric's position weakened. By Friday, James Holloway requested a settlement discussion. Laura and I met him in a small conference room downtown. Neutral. Sterile. James looked tired. "This has escalated beyond what my client intended," he said carefully. "Which client?" Laura asked. James hesitated. "Eric." I leaned forward. "Then why is his mother directing strategy?" James didn't answer. Instead, he slid a proposal across the table. Adjusted custody. No interference. No claims of instability. Each party responsible for their own housing. "And Patricia?" Laura asked. James cleared his throat. "She would step back." Laura looked at me. I shook my head. "No," I said. James blinked. "Excuse me?" "No quiet resolution," I continued. "No pretending this was a misunderstanding. If this ends, it ends on record." James frowned. "That could damage reputations." "Yes," I said calmly. "That's the point." The meeting ended without agreement. That night, I sat on the edge of Denise's guest bed, staring at the wall, while Lily slept beside me. I thought about how close I'd come to signing away my independence weeks earlier just to feel safe. I thought about how many women did, and I felt something harden into certainty. On Sunday, Eric showed up again. Alone. He looked like someone who hadn't slept. "I told my attorney everything," he said. "About the pressure, about the lease, about the email." I studied his face. "Why now?" "Because I don't want Lily growing up thinking this is normal," he said. "That control equals care." I nodded slowly. "This doesn't erase what you let happen," I said. "I know," he replied, "but maybe it stops it." It did. On Monday, James Holloway withdrew the motion for expanded custody. On Tuesday, the court ordered Patricia Mercer barred from any involvement in Lily's care or custody discussions. On Wednesday, Laura filed a motion to include interference findings in the final custody order. The judge granted it. Patricia didn't call me. She didn't show up anywhere near me. She disappeared, which would have felt like victory, if not for what came next. The following Thursday, Margaret Hale called, her voice low. "There's something else," she said. "What?" I asked. "The board's internal review uncovered additional communications," she continued. "Not just about you." I sat down. "About other tenants," Margaret said. "Other families." My chest tightened. "Patterns," she added. "Yours wasn't the first." I closed my eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. Margaret paused. "Now, it's bigger than us." The full custody hearing was officially canceled the next day. Eric and I signed a revised agreement. Clear, stable, enforceable. Lily stayed with me. Always had. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Because once systems start paying attention, they don't stop at the first crack. And Patricia Mercer had spent decades believing she was untouchable. She was about to learn the difference between influence and immunity. The final review was scheduled for the following month. And when it happened, everything she'd hidden behind philanthropy and politeness would be examined. Not by me, by people who didn't care who she was, only what she'd done. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was watching the consequences line up. The silence after a storm is never peaceful. It's suspended, waiting to see what's still standing. The month leading up to the Foundation's final review felt longer than everything that had come before it. No calls from Patricia, no surprise motions, no quiet pressure, just paperwork moving through channels that didn't bend for tone or reputation. That was new territory for her. For me, life narrowed back down to Lily and work. Mornings at Denise Walker's kitchen table. Afternoons in the shop's back room, sanding, sealing, shipping. Evenings, reading the same 3 books Lily insisted on every night. Normal things. And beneath them, a steady awareness that something large was shifting without my input. One afternoon, Margaret Hale asked to meet in person. We sat in her office this time. Glass walls, clean lines. Nothing personal on the desk. "The board's review is nearly complete," she said. "I want you to hear this from me, not through rumors." I nodded. Okay. They found multiple instances of Patricia Mercer using Foundation-adjacent resources to influence personal outcomes, Margaret continued. Housing pressure, vendor manipulation, Legal coordination. I exhaled slowly. How far back? Years, she said. Your situation was simply the one that left a trail. I thought about the other families. The ones who hadn't had documentation, or attorneys, or the energy to push back. What happens to them, I asked. Margaret held my gaze. Restitution discussions are underway. That mattered more to me than what happened to Patricia. And Patricia? I asked. Margaret didn't soften her voice. She will be formally removed from all foundation roles, permanently. I let the words settle. No shock, no triumph, just inevitability. There may also be referrals, Margaret added. Not criminal, but regulatory. Patricia Mercer had spent decades carefully staying just inside lines she helped draw. Now those lines belonged to other people. After the meeting, I walked to my car and sat there for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That night, Eric called. I heard, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. She's furious, he added. I imagine, I said. She says you ruined her, he continued. I didn't respond. After a moment, he said, I don't think she understands that this wasn't about you. No, I replied. It never was. He hesitated. I want to apologize. I waited. For letting her control things, he said. For not stopping it sooner. I considered that. I accept the apology, I said. Not the history. That's fair, he replied. We ended the call without drama. A week later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a call. A letter from Patricia Mercer. The handwriting was precise, controlled. Hannah, I will not pretend to understand your choices, but I acknowledge the outcome. I hope, for Lily's sake, you find the stability you seek. Patricia, no apology, no accountability, just distance, wrapped in formality. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. Some things don't need a response. The day the board's decision became public, the local paper ran a short piece. Mercer Family Foundation announces leadership restructuring. No names in the headline, just structure. But the subtext was clear. Philanthropy doesn't excuse misconduct. That afternoon, Denise brought me a cup of coffee while I worked. You okay? She asked. Yes, I said, and I meant it. Because for the first time in a long while, my life wasn't defined by reaction. Quiet Pines Studio signed a long-term wholesale agreement with 2 regional shops. Nothing flashy, sustainable, predictable. I moved Lily and me into a small duplex near her preschool. 2 bedrooms, a yard just big enough for chalk drawings and bubbles. The lease was in my name, only mine. The final custody order arrived by mail a week later. Clear language, strong boundaries, explicit protections against third-party interference. I read it once, then I put it away. One evening, Lily asked, Is Grandma Patricia coming to my birthday? I knelt beside her. No, I said gently. Why? She asked. Because some people don't know how to be kind without control, I replied. She thought about that. Then she said, Okay, children understand more than we think. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on the porch watching Lily draw with chalk and realized something else. Revenge wasn't what this had been. I hadn't planned to expose Patricia. I hadn't plotted her removal. I had simply refused to shrink. And systems built on quiet compliance don't survive that refusal. If you're listening to this and wondering when standing your ground turns into something dangerous, here's the truth. It's dangerous the moment someone needs you silent to stay powerful. The month ended without ceremony. No final confrontation, no dramatic apology, just consequences unfolding in the open. And as I locked the door that night, Lily already asleep upstairs, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Security. Not because someone gave it to me, because I built it where no one else could take it away. What I didn't know yet was that the story wasn't quite finished. Because when power falls, it doesn't disappear. It looks for somewhere else to land. And Patricia Mercer wasn't done trying to rewrite her ending. She just no longer controlled the narrative. And next time, she wouldn't be dealing with me. She'd be dealing with people who didn't care who she used to be. Power doesn't vanish when it's exposed. It relocates. I learned that the week after Patricia Mercer lost her seat on the foundation board, the first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a delay. A routine invoice from Quiet Pines Studio, already approved by 2 retail partners, was suddenly under review. No explanation, no errors cited, just stalled. Then a supplier I'd worked with for months emailed to say they were re-evaluating volume commitments. Then my landlord called, voice tight, asking if I had plans to move soon. 3 small disruptions. None illegal, all inconvenient, all familiar. That was when I understood. Patricia hadn't accepted the outcome. She'd changed tactics. She couldn't touch custody anymore, couldn't use the foundation, couldn't lean on judges or boards. So she was doing what people like her always do when they lose institutional power. She was applying social pressure. I didn't react right away. I waited. Because reacting too early would tell her she still mattered. Instead, I documented everything. Dates, times, names, email headers, call logs. Patterns matter more than incidents. 2 weeks later, Margaret Hale called. I wanted to check in, she said. Are you experiencing friction? Yes, I replied. She exhaled slowly. I thought so. She's not violating any orders, I added. She's just reminding people she exists. That won't last, Margaret said. Why? I asked. Because she's running out of leverage, Margaret replied, and people notice desperation. The next escalation came through Eric. He showed up unannounced one Saturday morning, while Lily and I were planting herbs in the yard. Hannah, he said, standing at the gate. Can we talk? I looked at Lily. Go wash your hands, sweetheart. She ran inside. Eric looked thinner, less certain. She wants mediation, he said. With whom? I asked. With you, he replied, informally. I shook my head. No. She says she wants to make things right, he added. I met his eyes. Does she? He didn't answer. She lost her foundation, he continued. Her reputation took a hit. She thinks closure might help. For who? I asked. He swallowed. For everyone. No, I said calmly. It would help her. That's not fair, he snapped, then caught himself. Sorry, She's struggling. I didn't raise my voice. So did I. Alone. Eric shifted his weight. She's considering legal options. That got my attention. What kind? I asked. She won't say, he replied. But she believes you acted in bad faith. I laughed. Once. Quietly. Good luck with that, I said. Eric frowned. You don't seem worried. I'm not, I replied. Because I didn't act. I responded. There's a difference courts understand very well. He looked at the ground. She wants to see Lily. No, I said, immediately. She's her grandmother, he argued weakly. She is a woman who tried to displace Lily's mother, I corrected. Those are not the same thing. He nodded slowly. I thought you'd say that. As he turned to leave, I added, Tell her this. He paused. She lost because she assumed silence meant consent, I said. If she pushes again, she'll lose something she can't rebuild. Eric didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. That afternoon, I made a call of my own, not to a lawyer, to a journalist. Her name was Rachel Collins, and she covered nonprofit governance and donor accountability for a regional paper. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. I'm not here to create a scandal, I told her. I'm here to prevent a pattern. She listened. I showed her the emails, the supplier calls, the pressure points. She's careful, Rachel said. She's not crossing lines. No, I agreed. She's drawing them. Rachel leaned back. You know, once this is out, it won't stop with her. I know, I said. That's why I waited. Why now? She asked. Because now she's moving quietly, I replied. And quiet harm lasts longer. Rachel nodded. I'll verify everything. I expect that, I said. The article didn't name Patricia at first. It didn't need to. It detailed how former foundation executives sometimes continue exerting influence through personal networks after removal. It outlined the ethical gray zones. It quoted experts. And in the final paragraph, it mentioned an unnamed single mother whose small business had been targeted through coordinated delays after refusing to comply with informal pressure. That was enough. The response was immediate. Suppliers called to apologize. One admitted they'd received suggestions about reducing exposure. Retail partners reinstated timelines. My landlord sent a text clarifying there had been a misunderstanding, and Patricia Mercer went silent. No letters, no calls, no intermediaries. Because public light doesn't accuse, it observes. And people who rely on shadows don't survive observation. A week later, Margaret Hale sent me a message. She's done, it read. Her board peers have distanced themselves completely. I set the phone down and watched Lily build a tower of wooden blocks on the living room floor. She knocked it over herself and laughed. Again, she said. Yes, I replied. Again. That night, as I packed orders for the week, I realized something important. I hadn't just protected myself. I'd shifted the cost. For years, the cost of Patricia's control had been paid by quieter people. Women without platforms, families without documentation, businesses without leverage. Now, the cost was hers, and she didn't like the bill. But the story wasn't over yet, because when people lose influence publicly, they sometimes attempt one last private move. And the voicemail waiting on my phone the next morning told me Patricia Mercer wasn't ready to stop. She was ready to escalate. And this time, she was making a mistake she couldn't walk back. Patricia Mercer's voice sounded different when she left the voicemail. Not sharp, not controlled, measured. Hannah, she said, using my name for the first time without formality. I think it's time we speak directly. I don't want intermediaries. I don't want misunderstandings. Call me. No threats, no accusations. That was what made it dangerous. I didn't call her back. I waited 2 days. Then the certified letter arrived. Not from Patricia, from an attorney. His name was Daniel Rothman, and his firm specialized in family reputational disputes and civil liability. The letter alleged that my actions had caused material harm to Patricia Mercer's standing in philanthropic and social circles, and suggested a pre-litigation settlement discussion. I read it once. Then I laughed, because for the first time, she had put everything she'd been doing quietly into writing. And writing leaves fingerprints. I forwarded the letter to Mark Ellison, the attorney who had helped finalize my custody agreement months earlier. I hadn't needed him since. He called me within an hour. She's bluffing, Mark said calmly, and she's angry. Is there any risk? I asked. Only if you'd lied, he replied. Did you? No, I said. Then this is posturing, he said. But it's sloppy posturing. How so? I asked. She's alleging harm without specifying falsehood, he explained. That opens discovery. And discovery is not her friend. I pictured Patricia Mercer, immaculate and proud, sitting across from a deposition attorney, asking her to explain phone calls, emails, favors. She wouldn't survive it. She's trying to scare you into silence, Mark continued. Classic. What do you recommend? I asked. He paused. We respond, briefly, clearly, and we set boundaries. The response went out the next morning. No emotion. No apology. It stated that all statements made were truthful, documented, and within legal rights. It declined mediation. It invited formal litigation if Patricia Mercer wished to proceed. And it added one sentence at the end. Any further attempts to interfere with my client's livelihood or custody arrangements will be met with immediate legal action. That sentence ended the conversation. Patricia did not sue. She didn't reply. Instead, she did something far more revealing. She called Lily's preschool. I found out when the director, a kind woman named Susan Alvarez, called me mid-morning. Hannah, Susan said carefully, I wanted to let you know someone claiming to be Lily's grandmother contacted us. My chest tightened. What did she want? She asked about pickup permissions, Susan said, and about Lily's schedule. Did you give her anything? I asked. No, Susan replied firmly. Our policy is very clear. But I thought you should know. Thank you, I said. You did exactly the right thing. After we hung up, my hands shook. That was the line. Not legally, perhaps, but morally. I called Mark again. This is escalation, he said flatly. And it's documented. What do we do? I asked. We file for a protective order extension, he said, and we notify the school formally. Within 48 hours, Patricia Mercer received notice that any attempt to contact Lily's school, caregivers, or medical providers would be considered harassment. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. And it worked, because people like Patricia don't fear confrontation. They fear records. That evening, Eric called again. She didn't mean to scare you, he said quickly. She was just checking. Stop, I said. There was silence on the line. She tried to access my child, I continued. That's not checking. That's control. She's desperate, he said. So was I replied. When she was trying to take my home, he exhaled. She doesn't recognize herself anymore. I do, I said. She's the same. She just doesn't have cover. Eric's voice cracked. What do you want? I thought about that. I want distance, I said. Permanent. I can't give you that, he replied quietly. You can, I said, by choosing not to carry her messages anymore. Another long pause. Then, okay, he said. That was the last time Eric called on her behalf. The legal system moved slowly after that, but the social consequences moved fast. Patricia Mercer's name stopped appearing on boards. Invitations dried up. The polite silence of social exile settled in. She still lived in the same house, but no one came to visit. Quiet Pine's studio continued to grow. Nothing viral, nothing explosive, just steady. I hired one part-time assistant, then another. By winter, I had a waiting list. On Christmas morning, Lily opened a small wooden jewelry box I'd made just for her. Her name carved inside the lid. This is mine, she said, holding it like treasure. Yes, I replied. It's yours. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room and realized something else. Patricia had wanted a reaction, a fight, a scene, a public collapse she could frame as instability. What she got instead was boundaries enforced quietly by systems she once controlled, and that was unbearable for her. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief, because the last illusion had finally broken. She wasn't powerful. She was persistent. And persistence only works until someone stops accommodating it. As the year closed, I received one final message. An email, short, from an unfamiliar address. Hannah, I hope one day you understand I only wanted what was best. No signature. I deleted it without response. Some narratives don't deserve a reply because closure doesn't come from mutual understanding. It comes from knowing you no longer need it. And as the snow fell quietly outside our small duplex, I understood that the story was almost over. Not because everyone had learned their lesson, but because I had. The morning after New Year's Day was quiet in a way that felt earned. No messages, no emails marked urgent, no name flashing on my phone that made my shoulders tense before I even picked it up. Just light coming through the kitchen window and Lily sitting at the table, carefully spreading peanut butter on toast like it was serious work. I watched her for a moment before speaking. Do you know what day it is? I asked. She thought hard. Tuesday. I smiled. That's right. It wasn't an anniversary, not a court date, not a deadline, not a reaction day, just a Tuesday. And that was the point. After everything, what I wanted most wasn't revenge. It was unremarkable days that belonged to me. Quiet Pine Studio officially became an LLC that month. The paperwork was boring. The fees were annoying. The sense of permanence was grounding. My name was the only one on the documents. No co-signers, no silent partners, no family leverage hiding in the margins. I opened a business checking account with a local credit union. The teller, a woman named Joyce with silver hair and kind eyes, congratulated me like it mattered. It did, because this business hadn't grown from a loan or a favor. It grew from late nights, cramped hands, shipping labels printed at midnight, and a refusal to disappear. The last loose thread tied itself off without drama. Patricia Mercer didn't appeal anything, didn't file, didn't show up anywhere she might see my name again. She faded. Not explosively, not publicly, just gradually as people stopped returning calls and invitations quietly stopped coming. I didn't track it. I didn't need to, because my life no longer required her absence to feel stable. One afternoon, while Lily napped, I packed an order bound for Oregon, a custom memory box commissioned by a woman honoring her grandmother. I sealed the lid, sanded the edges smooth, and carved the date carefully. I felt present. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on the floor of her room and leaned against the wall. I let myself feel everything I hadn't named before. Not grief, not anger, recognition. I had been underestimated because it was convenient, dismissed because I didn't announce myself, controlled because I once believed being agreeable was safer than being clear. The betrayal didn't start with Patricia Mercer. It started with the assumption that my silence meant permission. I don't make that mistake anymore. In early spring, I received an email from Rachel Collins, the journalist. "Just wanted you to know," she wrote. "Your story has been cited in 3 nonprofit ethics workshops this quarter." Anonymously. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not pride. Relief. Because anonymity meant the focus stayed where it belonged. On the pattern. Not the spectacle. Lily started kindergarten that fall. She carried her backpack like it was armor. I watched her walk into the building without looking back. That was when I understood something clearly. The cycle ended with me. Not because I burned anything down, but because I built something that didn't depend on permission. One evening, while closing up the workshop, Denise Walker stopped by. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You did good," she said. "I did what I had to," I replied. She shook her head. "No. You did what a lot of people don't. You stayed calm long enough to win without becoming them." I thought about that later, about how revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like opting out of someone else's script entirely. I still get asked how I did it, how I survived being pushed out, how I didn't collapse when the pressure came from people who smiled while doing harm. The answer is simple. Even if the work wasn't. I stopped explaining myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me, and I documented everything. If you're listening to this and you recognize parts of your own life in mine, here's what I want you to hear. You don't need permission to protect your child. You don't need approval to set boundaries. You don't need to raise your voice to be taken seriously. Systems favor those who stay quiet until they're ready. And dignity isn't loud, it's consistent. Lily turned 6 last week. We celebrated with cupcakes and sidewalk chalk. No extended family, no performative photos. Just neighbors, friends, people who showed up because they wanted to. That night, she fell asleep with frosting still on her cheek. I didn't wipe it off right away. I sat there and watched her breathe. I was 32 years old. I was no one's afterthought, and my life was finally proportional to my effort. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told to be grateful for less than you deserved, you know why I'm sharing this. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't. Share your story in the comments. We read them because silence protects the wrong people. And telling the truth, calmly and on your own terms, is how you take everything back.